Relaxation is who you think you should be. Tension is anxiety. Tension is who you think you should be. And relaxation is who you actually are. This is a note that I wrote on Substack recently, and it resonated with a lot of people, a lot more than I even expected. And I think that is because there's this common experience, especially right now where social media messaging is so saturated. There are just so many different sources of information and people telling us how we should live our lives and what we should do and how we should do things, from how to work out to how to eat to even how to write and speak and build relationships and friendships. Just every single aspect of life, you can find people telling you how you should live it. And I think it gets super overwhelming for people, especially for people who maybe don't have a very strong sense of self worth, or their self worth is derived and based on external validation. There will be a desire to follow what successful and productive people do, and then discard and ignore what they actually want to do and not make space for pleasure, for fun, for creativity. Because according to all the gurus out there, that's not what they should do. The reason why I wrote that was because when I read it, I just really resonated with it because I have done that, especially in my early to mid 20s. I have read so many self help books, so many self growth, self improvement books. And don't get me wrong, because they really helped me become the person I am today. But at the same time, I was so focused on constant self growth and optimization that almost became a part of my personality and character. And for a while, I didn't really talk about much else apart from personal development and personal growth. And I thought that was my only passion and interest. But over the past few years, I really taken the time to observe when I feel and have felt the most at ease and relaxed and the most inspired. And those are the moments when I know that I'm purely myself. Those are the moments like when I'm having a deep conversation with somebody, whether it's with a friend or a stranger at a cafe, or when I'm doing portrait photography, reading a good book, when I'm writing a piece on Substack, when I'm sketching. This reminds me of a moment when I was in Suzhou in China last year, when I was sketching in front of a canal. And I remember that moment so vividly because I was just so present and so at ease. Before I continue, hi, I'm Claudia. I'm the host of Our Core Things podcast. This is a podcast about self trust, intuition, reconnecting with our authentic selves, and our creativity. So that is why this quote resonated so much with me. I have to be honest, and I haven't yet found the origin of this quote in Chinese, but I have seen it in many places, and I'm sure that it is real. The point is that a lot of the time, there are so many shoulds in our head. There are so many shoulds that in many occasions we're doing things out of feeling like we need to. We might be performing a certain character in front of family, and we might be posting certain content that makes us seem cooler or more edgy. We might make friends with people we want to be seen with as well. Some of this might not come from our authentic desires, rather, a desire to show up as a certain person so that people perceive us in a certain way. When we do that, we naturally become more tense and more anxious because we are not our natural selves. When we're forcing something instead of naturally allowing things to happen and to flow, it often is a lot more force and there often is a lot more tension because there is an incongruence between how we're presenting and who we actually are. And that incongruence sort of requires exerting of more effort. And that is what causes that tension. So I encourage you to really pay attention this week to what you're doing, who you're with, where you are when you feel the most at ease and the most relaxed. Because that's a sign that you feel safe in that environment and you don't feel the need to perform anything. Because when we are authentic and when our inner world is aligned with our outer world, we are a lot more relaxed because we are not pretending to be anything other than who we are. And sometimes relaxation can be forced too. I'm sure you can go do a massage or you can spend an hour cooking and that will probably help you relax. But what I'm saying is just go about your regular day and really pay attention to what you're doing, what you're talking about, where you are when you're naturally more relaxed. That offers clearer signals to reflect what it is and what you're doing when you are just being yourself. Because when we're really ourselves, we shouldn't feel that everything is so anxiety inducing because we're at ease with who we are. Of course, it's important to distinguish between positive and negative tension. There is tension that is positive, and that happens when we're expanding ourselves, when we're moving out of our comfort zones, when we're doing new things, when we're putting ourselves out there. So, for example, as much as I love writing on Substack and podcasting, doing this with a new guest that I really respect or putting myself out there still creates tension because I'm pushing against my growth edge and I'm doing something that's different. It's very much like progressive overload. If you're familiar with weightlifting, that's basically when we increase the weights so that we put more pressure on our muscles to stretch the muscle fibers so that they can grow and then become stronger. And that is what I would consider positive tension. But there's also negative tension. And a personal example is when I'm at clubs that are very crowded or very chaotic. I just don't feel good in those environments and I feel very uneasy because there's too much chaotic energy. It feels messy to me. I don't love crowds who are, half drunk and sweaty. Growth requires a certain type of tension, but it's also important to realize that when something feels super forced and not aligned, it could also be a sign that maybe a certain way of doing things, a certain way of moving, talking, being in certain environments and certain people just doesn't suit your design. And that's also okay. Another reason why I mentioned this is because even on my own podcast episodes, the times when I've scripted the whole episode and well, I usually don't script the whole episode, but I will have chunks written out and I will have it very structured, even with some guest episodes where I have specific questions I want to ask my guests, so I stick to a specific structure. That's usually when I am a little bit more tense because I'm so focused on making sure the conversation is seamless and making sure I don't miss any of the questions and to the point where I don't even follow up on parts that make me really curious and parts that I have piqued my interest because I don't want to interrupt the flow of the conversation. And then because of that, there's a sense of underlying sense of tension in me because I'm trying to control, because I'm controlling the conversation and how it goes. Structure is important. Control sometimes is important too. But when we're doing it so much that we're not allowing ourselves to be led by curiosity, sometimes we will miss certain things. We might be, in the podcast example, I might have missed opportunities for a guest to share a certain story because I'm so focused on asking the questions that I have had in mind. And that's why it's very important for us to just be in tune with our bodies and notice where we're tense and where we are relaxed. And then when we feel that tension, take inhales and exhales for a few minutes and see if we can just come back into a state of relaxation. Because it's not only about being performative or not, it's also that when we are relaxed, things come to us easily because we're not in a state of trying to control the outcome and trying to force an outcome, which means that we're a lot more open, which means that we can see things and see opportunities that we may not have been able to see if we're just like laser focused on a certain outcome. This is one of the biggest lessons I've learned over the past few years. And it is really to come back into a state of being relaxed whenever I know that I'm trying to control things, whenever I'm tense. I was very much a control freak, but learning to relax, to stay open has genuinely been life-changing. So I will leave you with this question. Where in your life do you feel you're constantly tense, and why do you think that is? Thank you very much for watching. I also have a Spotify version of this podcast, and I'm also on Substack. So feel free to connect with me on those platforms.